All right, well, welcome to our first lecture, The World's Equids. Now, you may ask yourself, what's an equid? And it's kind of the term for these animals that fall under this taxonomic family known as Equidae. So, the first one that falls into Equidae is the horse, which, obviously this course is about. And the two scientific terms for the horse is Equus caballus and Equus ferus. Now, Equus caballus is for the domestic type horse, and then Equus ferus is for the wild type horse, which today is the Przewalski horse. That's the only one that's left of the wild type, even though we have, feral horses from Equus caballus that have been released in the wild and are now feral. They're still Equus caballus. Now, the next classification of an equid is a donkey or an ass, known throughout many parts of the world, and their scientific name is Equus asinus. And then the final member of this family is the zebra. So, there's many subspecies of Equus that are zebras that we're going to talk about later in this lecture, so I couldn't really fit them all on this line here. But there's one more that we can't forget about. So we have the horses, the donkeys, and the zebras, but you can also consider these hybrids, which really is the most common, is the mule, as an equid. So they are equids. They're just a cross species of Equus caballus and Equus asinus, or there's actually zorses and zonkies, which in a lecture later this week that you'll learn more about. Now, the next thing we want to look at is the global population, and the best information I could find is this report from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and they update, livestock species, throughout the world through surveys or estimations, and their last estimate from 2011 is there's 58 million horses on Earth, which is pretty amazing. And then if we look at donkeys or asses, there's another 43 million equids out there. So again, you have 58 million horses, 43 million donkeys, and then this was really surprising to me. I didn't realize how many mules we actually have on Earth or around the world, and there's over 10 million mules, which is really cool. So overall, we're looking at 111 million equids, donkeys, horses, and mules are around many continents. Antarctica is probably the only one where there isn't a horse because they probably couldn't survive down there very well. But what's really exciting about that is with all of these animals is there's all those owners that are enthusiastic about owning them or actually need them in their daily lives to run their business or to get to work or to do the things that man has been doing with horses and donkeys and mules for 6,000 years. So pretty exciting data there. Now, if we look at breaking it down by country, I just listed the top 7. And the United States came in ranked number 1 with over 10 million horses, which wasn't too surprising to me because, it's a horse hotbed here in the States. But you go down this list, China has 6.7 million, still a huge population of horses there. Mexico, 6.3 million. Breaking it down, and the one country that really surprised me was Ethiopia with over 2 million head of horses. And I was really surprised that they had that many, more than Russia. And then if you go look at the donkeys or the asses, Ethiopia's number 1 with 6.5 million. And then again, breaking it down, China, Pakistan, Egypt. I was fortunate enough to be in Egypt a few years ago, and I saw plenty of donkeys still pulling carts, working the fields with agriculture. Big part of their life there in Egypt. They're beautiful animals. Mexico and then a couple other countries in Africa, Niger and Nigeria, huge populations of donkeys that are still working for their owners today. And then when you break down this population of mules, Mexico came in number 1 with 3.2 million, and then China there, Brazil, Morocco, there's Ethiopia again. So Ethiopia has a huge equid population, Peru and Argentina. Now we can't forget the other, the wild type animals. Now, Equus ferus, there's a few thousand Przewalski horses still roaming, in Mongolia and China. They were re-released, so they're still out there in some preserves that as we reestablish that population. So really the only other true wild equids are the zebras and the wild asses. So if we look first at the plain zebra, you can see their scientific name, Equus quagga. And this is what everybody thinks of when they think of zebras. They think back to the Serengeti plain, in Tanzania, running away from predators. And, that's what we typically think of. And there's over 600 160,000 of these animals. So they're still doing relatively well in the wild. But the other two populations of zebras aren't doing so hot. The first is the mountain zebra, Equus zebra, and they're listed as vulnerable. There's only about 9,000 of these animals left, and they're in the southwestern region of Africa. And what's unique about these animals too is you can see that dewlap right there. And that's important because these animals are, in hotter parts of Africa, and that helps them thermoregulate that extra skin. So it's really cool if you ever see these at a zoo, or if you're fortunate enough to see them in the wild, you can see that dewlap, and it's pretty unique to them. And then the other zebra species is the Grevy zebra, and this is the one that's endangered. There's about 2,000 animals left, and they range from really central to southeastern Africa. And I've done a little bit of work with these guys, and really need to be aware that they are endangered. They're being overhunted. They're in competition with livestock in that part of the world, and just kind of a something to be aware of, that those animals are in trouble. And then we don't want them to end up like the quagga here, which went extinct in 1875. And what's really cool about this one is it looks like a half zebra, half donkey. And unfortunately, there's no live specimens anymore, and we actually can't look at these animals in their beauty. Now, there's two major classes of wild donkeys or wild asses, and there's the African wild ass and the Asiatic wild ass. So our domestic populations came from these animals. And what's left of the African wild ass is really only the Somali wild ass, and there's maybe 600 animals left in the world, and it's really unfortunate. You can see here the Somali wild ass, with that leg striping. These are beautiful animals. I've been fortunate enough to do some research with these guys, and I hope to continue to do research with them in trying to save this population. I really hope they don't go extinct in my lifetime, even though that's what it's looking like as they lose their habitat and some other problems. And then next to that is the Nubian wild ass that went extinct within probably the last 20 years. It's definitely extinct in the wild, and you can see what's unique about this is this one had the stripe over the shoulders. So when you look at domestic donkeys today, which we will later in the week looking at breeds of donkeys, you can still see leg stripings and that back stripe, from their original Nubian wild ass and the Somali wild ass. Now, the Asiatic wild asses, there's ones known as, the onagers, the kulons. These are endangered, so there's maybe 8,000 of these left in the wild. So again, competition with humans. Also a major danger to these populations is, feral donkeys that get away from their owners are actually breeding with the wild population. So you get a mixing of the genetics, and you no longer have a true wild, Asiatic wild donkey or a true wild African wild donkey. So anyways, but they are out there, and they are part of what's an equid. Now, our next lecture is we're going to start with the evolution of the horse, and to a lesser extent donkeys and zebras, where they all have common ancestors. So we'll cover that in much more detail in the next lecture.